Hey everyone, it's Kate back for what are we on? Day 4 of our 7-day series. Why women leaders, the 7 mistakes women leaders make that prevent us from having it all. All right, so let's get out of the gilded cage. Hello everyone who's been listening and following all week. It's been really great to have you here. So what we're going to talk about today is the F word. I know, a little bit of marketing gimmicky there, but it's true. And it's something that as high achievers, highly successful women who are very intellectual, guys too, but mostly this tends to be a little bit more for women, is we have this thing called fear that seems to prevail from our younger years all the way up the corporate ladder or whatever ladder that you're climbing there professionally. And this fear really holds us back from being an influencer in our career. Instead, what we're doing is what? We're trying to prove ourselves. We're trying to keep our place at the table. So I want you guys to just, if you're willing to be open and really transparent, what are some of the fears that have come up for you in your career, especially recently, and especially as a woman leader? Because remember, there's a lot of young women watching us too. And they're like, wow, if you're so formidable and you're so uber confident, like they're terrified. Like, do you guys remember what it was like to be like 25 or 30 or some, so if we can't share some emotion, it's going to be really tough for those who are coming up behind us to be really authentic and influential leaders as well. But some of the common fears could be, fear of missing out. This was huge for me. Huge for me. As someone who has worked since she was 11 years old, I'm like, wait a minute, there's a conference going on and I didn't get invited. Or, even if it conflicted with my personal life, I always did sort of like the nice Jane. Well, I'll go for a day. When it was like, really, I didn't want to go at all. I wanted to be at home in my pajamas, like with my kids. But we kind of get into that nice girl syndrome where, oh, I better go. So there's fear of missing out because you're afraid you're not going to get the choice assignment, the promotion. Something will be doled out at that event, that meeting, that project, and you'll miss out. There's fear of what others think. I think this is huge for women. Part of that is because we can be upheld to a different standard or there's a double standard. But I think women in general worry so much more about this. I think one of the things we work on a lot with a lot of the women we who are clients is how to communicate through conflict. As women, we have this deep fear that, we're going to be judged. People won't like us. We will be held to that double standard and be seen as, a brute or a, different B word. And I don't think any of us aspire to be that. Nobody wants to be that glass chewing chick that everyone's like so afraid of. But a lot of times we have that fear that if I speak up, or if especially our male counterpart, barks back, then we back down. And for all of the guys out there listening, let me first say that we have a tremendous amount of guys on our list who are extremely phenomenal leaders who care deeply about their teams and aren't the stereotypical, careless dude in the suit. But this is really a message for women. And I think this is where the guys can help sometimes, is help women find that voice and say it's okay. And so there's a real fear of navigating through conflict. And if you can't navigate conflict, then you can't influence, right? And if you can't influence, then you're still in the gilded cage. And that's why I always say the gilded cage resides inside of us. It's very rarely in our workplace. I mean, sometimes, but very rarely. So that fear of judgment is huge. And if you don't know how to navigate and communicate through that, like I was talking to a client the other day, and like my husband will walk in, he would walk into any boardroom or conference room or to anyone he's ever worked for, and he would just lay it on the line and be like, dude, you're being a jerk. Stop being this way or whatever. I mean, I don't think he would talk that way, but you know what I'm saying? Like he would just lay on the line exactly what he's thinking and feeling, and they would resolve it and kind of like whatever they need to do, duke it out, so to speak. I'm being a little, silly. And then they get on with it. And think about that. I remember one time I had it was a male boss who told me that I was being too smart. Don't even go there. And I needed to not be so threatening. And you know what? As much as that makes me go, oh my gosh, he was right. I know. And what he meant by that was I had so much fear walking into every room that stone cold Kate walked in the room. Do you know what I mean? Like I was the expressionless Roboton, don't let them see you sweat. And I just couldn't walk in the room and not try to be smart. And I wasn't being a jerk about it. But, if people were talking about, I don't know, fishing or the color of the sky or whatever, I was like, well, did you see what happened in the stock market today? Or I don't know, like there was always like something I was doing because I was always trying to impress, which is, unfortunate, because while it was impressive in some ways and I got to demonstrate, I guess, how smart I was, I just wasn't being human enough because I didn't know how to be human. And there's a big fear around that. And I'll talk about that more tomorrow, but there's a big fear for women of just showing up authentically. You don't have to be, you don't have to be unemotional. You don't have to be super emotional. You can just be authentic, but fear really holds us back. And so that fear of what others are thinking can be huge. What are some other fears you guys can think of? Put them in the comments. Like, what about, so there's fear of missing out because we are so attracted, fear of what others think. Fear of retribution is a big one. Like, oh, I'll get fired if I go to lunch. I can't tell you how many clients have told me that. Clients in very senior leadership positions. I'm like, you're not going to get fired if you go to lunch. I promise. But there's this real fear that there will somehow be a black mark on our career. A fear about our reputation. Reputation management is a big one. And again, if we're always looking externally for that validation of our reputation and not understanding internally our true value and being able to be that authentic, influential player, then there's going to be a lot of fear. But let's talk about some of the more subtle fears. Like, I think most of us women who are highly successful, we don't wear our emotions on our sleeve. We are pretty guarded about our emotions. So you may even be feeling uncomfortable right now and going, Kate, I don't have fear. I'm super confident. Everyone looks at me and I'm confident. And I was too, guys. Like, and I don't think anyone has walked up to me and said, Kate, you look like a weak person in my life. I don't think anyone's ever told me, Kate, you look like you lack confidence. I don't know if I've ever heard that. You know what I'm saying? But that doesn't mean that you feel confident on the inside or fully capable, right? So imposter syndrome is a big deal for a lot of successful women. When I used to say to myself, when are they going to find out I don't have a clue what I'm doing? And as we get promoted up into our careers, guys, that feeling intensifies because you're leaving the world of, I'm actually, got a notebook and taking notes, and there's this tangible result of your work. Because as you elevate into leadership, you are working in more gray space and more of those softer skills where it's more about being influential. It's more about like opening the door for your team. It's more about resourcing your team and growing other people. But if you're feeling threatened, then you're holding your team back. If you feel like the results are all on you, you're holding your team back and you're holding yourself back. And so that fear of being an imposter and trying to gravitate back to being the person who produces the output, that can be really detrimental, again, to having it all, because then what are you doing? You're working 10 times harder than you need to be. And you're working in a space that doesn't allow you the white space to actually enjoy your life and be the leader you need to be. So you're sort of crossing the two divides of, I'm still being really tactical and executionary and way too deep in the weeds. Oh, and by the way, I'm also coming home at night and doing all my thinking when I should be, hanging out with my partner or going out to dinner with friends. So that can be really, really destructive, obviously, to having it all because of that fear. But there's also fear, what I wanted to start to say, that is masked in just actions. For example, how many of you get up every morning and you go straight to your email or get straight on your laptop and you start responding? And, your spouse says, hey, let's go for a walk. Or your kids come and say, Mommy, come have breakfast. And you're like, I'll be there in a minute. And then you overstay and you miss that moment. Okay. Like that used to happen to me all the time. And then I would look up and it'd be time to get my daughter to school. And I'd be like, I just missed breakfast again. And it's crushing, that hurts your heart when you know that you've done that to yourself, but also you've done it to your family. Underneath that response is fear. And you can call it whatever you want. Well, I hate for people to have to wait on my emails, or no, I just need to get something to my team. They're waiting on me. That's not nice. But underneath all that, what is it really? When you kind of like question that, if your team didn't hear from you or your boss didn't get a response from you for 90 minutes in the morning, what are you really afraid of? They won't trust you. You're afraid. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not concerned that your boss is just sitting there twiddling his thumbs. You're concerned he's getting angry or she's getting angry. You're concerned about your reputation. You're concerned that you look like you've dropped the ball. You're concerned that you don't look like you're more committed. So I'm using the word concern, but that's just a really nice word for fear. right? And so what we can see is there's these patterns, these psychological patterns that really prevent us from acting and behaving in ways that have you own it and just have it all. Now, again, what does having it all mean? It's going to mean different things to different people. And that's why you got to go back to the very first broadcast in the series. It's going to mean something different for you. But in general, it means like, I feel like I have control over my life. I feel like I have control over my time. I feel like I have control over my emotions. I'm emotionally calm and feeling great every day in my skin. I have I have control over my health. I have control over my relationships with people. I have control over the amount of time I spend doing things that are fun and fulfilling and, attractive to me and hobbies or whatever. Like that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about having it all. Right. And so fear is a huge, huge driver. And one of the things that was really interesting to me is I started to really start studying why so many of us are in this gilded cage and how every now and then I'd come apart. I was observing and I was doing all this research and I was like, oh man, every now and then there's somebody who doesn't live in the gilded cage. How does that person do it? And one of the things I found is that person seemed to be really, really, really comfortable with fear. And I was like, oh, that's pretty fascinating. How do I get that? Because fear never leaves us, guys. I mean, a lot of us are looking for like, where's that easy street where you just go through life and you have no fear? And I don't think there's anyone out there that doesn't have fear. And I may have mentioned this before. I've shared this quote several times, but I remember someone was asking like Elon Musk once, like, how did you become Elon Musk? And he's like, I just have a high tolerance to pain. And what he's talking about again is he has a high tolerance to fear. Like he will do things that most of us would just shy away from. He will take risks that most of us would be terrified with. When you start becoming more comfortable with fear, you also start living more vividly. And that is what's so beautiful about it. And believe me, I shied away from this for just decades of my life. I missed out on so much living because of fear. I was trying to avoid fear. And when you avoid fear, what happens? You're playing small. You're not taking risks. You're not living boldly. You're not living authentically many times. You're accepting circumstances that aren't healthy for you, that aren't, that don't align with who you are and your core values because you're afraid to be anything else. You're afraid because you don't know how to handle the situation. You're afraid because you don't have the tools or the skills or the framework, right? And the thing is, guys, we always are going to have fear. I have just as much fear today as I did 20 years ago. It's just different fear. It's new fear because I'm living in a different place. My life has evolved to a different place. I've elevated myself and who I am to a different place. And so we always have fear, but if fear of loss, fear of judgment, fear of missing out, fear of all these things we talked about are preventing you from taking actions that would actually give you this glorious life that you keep looking for, that's a big piece of it right there, right? Like that is huge. That is huge. And we live in so much fear. And it's almost like once you get the hang of this and you start going, oh my gosh, like fear does not have to control me anymore. It is so red pill, blue pill, or what is that word? Like everyone else is having the blue pill. Is that the Matrix? And like you're on the red pill and you're like, man, all those people are living in fear all the time. And you can see it. And that's one of the cool things about the clients we work with is like they start to see the behaviors of the other people that they're working with. And they're like, oh, well, now I can influence their behavior too, because I get what's going on behind the lens. And I'm like, exactly. That's one of the gifts of human behavior and really understanding human behavior is not only can you start being more authentic, but you can also help others along the way. And that's when influencing gets really rich and good, right? Because it's authentic. It's not politicking. It's not brown nosing. It's not doing all those things that we don't want to do. It's just showing up really authentically without that fear, or knowing that I do have fear, but it's not controlling me. And I'm really comfortable navigating the situation. Whoo, hallelujah. That is so good. All right, guys. So I can't wait to see all your comments about fear. I know you guys have been really open and vulnerable, and I want to thank you for sharing for those of you who did. For those of you who are serious about living a life where you are in control of what's happening in your world, and you do want to feel that you have it all, I'm going to encourage those of you who are serious, not those who are curious, the serious ones, to book a call with our team. We're doing some pretty phenomenal work on those calls and helping you get really clear on what's possible for you, what's holding you back, and what really needs to happen. We do ask that you watch some of our trainings first so you have a better idea coming into that call, but book a call with us and see what's going on for you and what's possible for you. And I can promise you it's going to be the best probably hour you've spent on yourself and your life and your future and your career in a really long time. Again, guys, my name is Kate Byers. I'm the founder of Corporate Women Unleash, and pay it forward. There's probably someone else out there that who is living life a little too uptight, a little too intense, and maybe the F word applies to them as well. Just saying, pass it along in your network. Could be really helpful to some other woman sitting out there. All right, guys, thanks so much.